Here is another situation for unit conversion that is sometimes confusing to people. The specific question here is converting 500 inches squared, or square inches, into centimeters squared, or square centimeters, depending on what you call it. The issue here is converting units with exponents in them. Both inches squared and centimeters squared are units for measuring surface area. And generally we use units of length with an exponent of 2 to measure areas, just like we use units of length with an exponent of 3 to measure volumes for three-dimensional spaces. I'm going to show you a mathematical method for solving this problem that you can apply to any other problem with exponents on units. So we are starting with 500 inches squared, and we want to know what the area would be in centimeters squared. The first thing we need is a relationship between inches and centimeters. Now you might ask at this point, why don't we find a relation between inches squared and centimeters squared if those are the units we're actually converting between? And the answer is you could do this question that way if you had a relationship like that available, but I'm going to teach you this more general method because I think it is more useful. It's not difficult, and you can use this method with any square unit or cubed unit, or even units with higher exponents, like say if you had meters to the power of 4, if you ever ran into that kind of question. But anyway, I know the relationship is 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters. From this relation comes the standard two conversion factors, 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters and 2.54 centimeters over 1 inch. And I want to use the one with inches on the bottom so it will cancel. That's because inches is on the top in the original amount if you write it as a fraction. So far this is exactly the same as any unit conversion problem, but here is where things are going to change. Because my original amount was in inches squared, I have to square the entire conversion factor before I multiply by it. So I'll put this whole fraction to the exponent 2, and this is what it looks like. Now it helps here to remember a little bit about how fractions work with exponents. Because the exponent is outside the bracket that is around the entire fraction, this exponent applies to the entire fraction top and bottom. So I need to square both the top and the bottom of this fraction, and the way it works out is that 2.54 squared is 6.45, and centimeters squared is just centimeters squared, because that's what happens when you square a unit or raise a unit to any exponent really. It's just the unit gets put to that exponent. So what I just did was take this whole top, 2.54 centimeters, and it became 2.54 squared and centimeters squared. The 2.54 squared is 6.45, and centimeters squared is just centimeters squared. And now doing the same thing with the bottom of the fraction, I get 1 squared is 1, and inches squared is just inches squared. So I did the bottom the exact same way as the top, and this is the result. So now you can see with these two fractions that inches squared will cancel. And all we have left to do is multiply the fractions together. 500 times 6.45 over 1 is equal to 3,226. And the only unit that hasn't been canceled is centimeters squared, so that's the answer. So I'll just write my final statement stating that 500 inches squared is the same as 3,226 centimeters squared. And that is the correct answer, but it's always a good idea to check and make sure it makes sense. Does it make sense that over 3,000 centimeters squared covers the same area as 500 inches squared? And if you don't have an idea of how big those areas are, just check over each step. Make sure the units canceled properly, since if they didn't cancel right, that can be a source of error, and make sure all the multiplying was done right.